So let's start with your home screen. How many people, and if you know how to raise your show of hands, how many people are on LinkedIn? Is there anyone that, or maybe I should ask the opposite question. Is there anyone that's not currently on LinkedIn? Okay. So if you have any questions about getting started, feel free to also reach out to me as well too, but you can actually go to LinkedIn and sign up for an account if you're not already on it. But hopefully I think everyone here is, it sounds like everyone's at least at the basics of we're on LinkedIn. So this home screen that you log into, you'll see your profile in the corner. You'll see a news feed in the middle, and then you'll see some news on the side, maybe some ads on the side, as well as anything from groups, etc. And we'll come back to this main screen in a little bit. But I like to tell people that if you're going to start reaching out with people and possible prospects on LinkedIn, the first thing you want to do is actually look at your profile, right? Because if you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn and your profile hasn't been updated in a little bit, or maybe it needs some tweaks here and there, you want to do that before you start some of these initiatives to build your network, to reach out to different people. Because just like in the real world, you want your image online to match who you are in person, right? So if we start there, then we can at least have a great impression for you on LinkedIn before you start connecting with people.
Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, go ahead.
For some reason, your screen, the writing on the screen is really blurry. We can't really read the words.
Oh, okay. Let me try to stop sharing and reshare. 1 second. Okay, can you see the screen a little bit better now?
We can see your picture, the words. Oh, that's getting better. That's getting better when you made it bigger.
Is that a little bit better too?
There. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Hmm? It's sometimes hard to know what other people are seeing on my screen.
I thought it was me.
Thank you for speaking up. I appreciate it. So this profile section, you want to make sure, first of all, this is up to date. So if you haven't been on LinkedIn in a little while, this might be you might have an old position as your current position, right? You may not have added some information that's there. And fortunately for us, LinkedIn does walk you through it. So if you have any areas that need to be updated on your LinkedIn profile, it'll usually say here on the right-hand panel that make sure you add an About Us to your section. Make sure that you add your most recent activity, etc. So it'll usually give you some tips on the right-hand side about what you should be adding to this area. Make sure that for every area that you have on here that you have a little bit about you. So not necessarily just what the company is and what your position is, but what is it that you specialize in? What is it that you bring to the table, right? And this also helps, again, when people are making that split decision of connecting with you or not, that they understand who you are and what you do. Having some of the relevant backgrounds about yourself. So what are the other companies that you've worked for in the past? And sometimes what you'll notice too is that for some of these positions, for example, you notice that there's an icon, right? So you can see there's Capital Practice Consulting's logo. You can see this is Exceltus's logo. Sometimes you'll see that there isn't a logo. Now, if there isn't a logo, back before companies had profiles on LinkedIn, they didn't have logos on their profiles and on LinkedIn to connect them to. So sometimes all you need to do is edit one of your positions and see if they do now have a presence on LinkedIn. And once it reconnects, you should see the logo pop up for that particular business on LinkedIn. And then you can save it and it'll keep that logo on your business as well. It also means that you're now associated with that business on LinkedIn too. Fill out your education section, fill out any licenses and certifications that you have, any volunteer experience that you do. David can attest to this. When we're in BNI, we talk about having something in common with someone and being able to talk to them about similar interests in order to connect with them better. So a lot of these sections are meant to be there to help you connect with people as well too. So someone might see, oh, Heather was a CPR instructor for the Red Cross. I also volunteer with the Red Cross. Maybe she'd be interested in getting involved with the Red Cross again, right? So it just gives us something to talk about. Skills and endorsements. This is a section that you can have people add or endorse you for certain skills, as well as get people to endorse you for or make recommendations about working with you. Now, this recommendation section, David and Michael and I were talking about, is actually a really great section to have, because you can actually ask people that you're connected to on LinkedIn to recommend you do. So for example, I could send David Hobbs a request for recommendation, and then I talk about like, what was our relationship? Was he a client? Was he a top? Did he teach me? Were we students together? David worked with me, but in different groups. And what was your position at the time? And then it'll have you say, hi, David, could you write me a recommendation? Thank you. And what that does, again, is for someone like yourself, who's a business professional that doesn't necessarily have an online presence, right? In the sense that Heather Pressler does not have a personal page on the internet. Oh, looks like the screen is blurry again.
Hey, Heather, quick question. So when you send somebody a request to write a recommendation for you, like I did a little bit of homework beforehand, and I could see a lot of the people on our team maybe has recommendations of people who work with them, right? So, you know, so-and-so's, you know, former manager saying what a great employee they were. But what we're really talking about is how it could be advantageous to have, you know, some of the businesses who bank with you to give a testimony about what it's like with you as the relationship manager, how responsive you are, how caring you are, how much, how valuable the advice is that you shared with them. If you ask somebody for a recommendation, is that discreet or hidden, or will that appear somewhere else on a feed that now people see that I'm like, I guess in a sense, looking for handouts, you know what I mean? Because I think that could give the wrong impression to your entire network if that was visible.
So in this case, when you're asking for a recommendation, it actually, what it does is it sends David a note. So it sends actually a private note to that person asking them to specifically visit this part of LinkedIn to write you a recommendation. So no, it does not appear as a public request online.
Thank you.
Fortunately, because to your point, yes, that's maybe not the activity we want to highlight, right? Accomplishments. So this section, again, is important because it tells people a little bit about who you are. It gives you a chance to, you know, show off your brag book, so to speak, gives you legitimacy as to who you are and what you do. Interests. Now, these interests are based off of following different profiles on LinkedIn. And we'll talk about that in a second section. And it also gives you the chance to interact with different material on LinkedIn as well, too. So if you think of this as like a social network, like all other social networks, it's essentially giving you people to follow on this particular social network. So that runs through the profile section of LinkedIn. Do you have any, are there any additional questions on the profile section? Excellent. So once you've had a chance to update your profile section, that's when you can start, all right, let's start building this network, right? And so under My Network here at the top is the next screen. You can actually see who's in your network and how many people you're connected to. And this particular area, it allows you to see your connections, teammates, that would be people that you work with at your company, contacts. Now this would be if you've uploaded any data or any email accounts to LinkedIn, it's telling you how many contacts you have. People you follow, groups that you're a part of, events that you might be interested in or you've run before, pages that you've been that you're following or interested in, newsletters and hashtags that you follow as well. So it looks like we have a question. Screen is blurry. My apologies. Let's see. Sometimes if I move it in and out, I think that's what's helping with that. In terms of how you build your connections, because that's kind of the first step you're going to want to do, is you can go to your connections. One moment. Not sure. One moment. Went a little too far ahead. It jumped ahead on me there. And then it shows who you've recently connected with. And then on the right hand panel, if you see here, oh, sorry, David.
It's blurry again.
Okay. Might still be loading for you all.
Hey Heather, this is a little bit more technical, but on your internet, if you are connected in your home network, if you're transferring data on 5G versus standard, if you're on standard, you don't have enough bandwidth. So that might be the reason why you're getting a blurry screen. So you can just confirm that you're connected to 5G.
Yeah, I'll check really quick. One moment. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it should be connected to the right network. I apologize. We also have a lot of people on the call as well too, so I might be slowing it down a little bit. Okay, so on the connections section, there is a section on the very far right, and you might, if you have the video screen up, the people on our video screen might be blocking this section. But your contact import area is on the far right of LinkedIn, and this is where you can upload new contacts to LinkedIn. And now there's a couple of ways to do this. One way is using your email accounts, and that's actually probably the easiest way. What you can do is you can connect multiple different email accounts to LinkedIn. You could connect your work email, you can connect your personal email. And what it will do is it looks through all the email addresses in that particular email folder or file, and then it'll find them on LinkedIn. Now, there are two steps, and I kind of always warn people about this. The first step, usually when you connect an email address, it's showing people that are on LinkedIn with that email address. The second step is usually saying you should invite people to join LinkedIn. Now, the second step I usually tell people to skip, only because it doesn't necessarily mean that person's not on LinkedIn. It just might be a different email address than what they currently use on LinkedIn. So I usually recommend you skip the second step, but you do the first step. So for example, on here, I could add Dr. Fuchs as my connection. Now you can add one connection or you can add all of them at once. And a lot of times I recommend to people to just add as many contacts as you see fit, right? Now this is the second page where it says a LinkedIn connection means you never lose touch. I would recommend skipping this particular step. Oh, I apologize. Let me close out some other things too to see if we can get the screen to not be so blurry. So hopefully that will fix part of it. Okay, so I recommend skipping the second step because you don't want to send, and it can be pretty significant. It can be like 2,000 to 3,000 people you might end up skipping. And you don't necessarily want to send spam to 2,000 to 3,000 people. So it's a good idea just to do the first task where you're adding people that you know are on LinkedIn versus inviting a lot of people to go into LinkedIn. Now they have a couple of other ways that you can upload contacts as well too. If you have a XML file, so an XLS file with, or a CSV file, maybe it was a previous position that you had where you downloaded all of your contacts from a previous position. You can also do it manually. I will give you a warning that sometimes with LinkedIn, connecting an email address is not a simple process. They still have Microsoft Outlook on here, but I know a lot of people I was working with were having difficulties with Outlook accounts connecting properly to LinkedIn. So that would be like an example where you might want to download your contacts from Outlook as opposed to trying to connect directly to Outlook from your computer. Do we have any questions about this particular section where you're updating your network? Excellent. So the next section that you can do on LinkedIn is to grow your network with people that you don't already know. LinkedIn is a very powerful network, same with Facebook actually, where it allows you to search for people based on certain job characteristics that they do, who they are, and then it allows you to see how you're connected to them. So David, what would be, I'll put you on the spot, what would be a good connection for you in terms of maybe someone that could send a lot of leads to you?
By name or position?
Position.
Position?
Yes.
Executive director of a nonprofit.
So it gives you, if you're in the search bar for LinkedIn, it gives you a couple of options. One is that you can search in jobs, people, or groups, right? And we'll talk about groups in a moment, but let's search for an executive director in people. Now, once I've searched for that, it'll give me a lot of different options. So an example that I get is, I get a Denny Kalyala, who is an executive director at the World Bank. Now, that is not the type of executive director that David is looking for, but it is an executive director. You can actually search based on not only the title, but also the company. So I could look for executive directors at Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. Right? I can look at locations. So if I only want to connect with people in the Washington, D.C. area, I can add Washington, D.C. as one of those areas. In addition, I can also look at who I'm connected to with these people as well too.
If you zoom it in, when you zoomed it in last time, it got clearer.
Okay. Is that better?
A little more. It's getting there. Strange. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and it's hard because I'm not seeing the issue, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So regardless, what's on this page right now is just a list of people that meet the criteria that I'm looking for. And you can filter by companies, you can filter by areas, you can filter by a lot of different things. Connections, so are they a first degree connection, a second degree connection? Industries, languages that they speak, colleges that they've gone to. Basically, any piece of information that you've put on LinkedIn, you can search and filter people based on that information. So you can be very directed in the ways in which you do some of this data mining on LinkedIn. And this is what I would recommend spending once you've updated your profile and made connections, is spending time on this section of LinkedIn and putting on your calendar every week. I'm going to spend 1 hour on LinkedIn looking at these different connections for people. Because I think that that's a good way that you can find new connections. Now, the great way to then, let's say I want to make one of these connections, right? I'm going to put in accountants. So a great example would be, I have a second degree connection to an accountant named Mana Siddiqui, and my second degree connection is through Mojan Begbani. So now I'm not connected directly to him, but I could, in theory, reach out to him and ask for an introduction to Mona. And same with, especially if they're a first degree connection, it might say David Hobbs is the connection to Mona. And I could say, hey, David, I saw Mona's an accountant in DC. It would be a good connection for me. Do you mind sending an email to introduce us? So it's another way of getting what are, essentially warm connections from your network that you didn't necessarily even know existed, right? So I may not know who David's connections are in accounting, but because of LinkedIn and his network on LinkedIn, now I do know, and I can ask him for specific introductions. And now these might be, and one good way to use this might be to get warm connections that will be your quote unquote golden geese. And golden geese are, again, people who can send many people to you as clients of the bank, or could be a good connection for you personally or professionally. Another way you can do it is also finding golden eggs, right? So if you know that that executive director of the nonprofit is your golden egg, then that's a worthwhile connection for you to have, regardless of whether or not they start to reach out or talk to you, sort of deal. And the great way to do this is either you can ask for an introduction via email from someone that you know, or you can just connect with them on LinkedIn. And when you send a connection, you can personalize it. So you can say, hi, Mona, I'm interested in learning more about your services, like to connect, right? And you can personalize this in any way that you see fit, and then you can send that connection. And then you can make that connection and hopefully start a conversation with that person as well too. As well as over email. So you can use the platform or you can use email as well. Does anyone have any questions regarding prospecting within this network area?
Heather, are you going to touch base on groups next? Because if so, I'll hold my question.
Yes, we can talk
Okay.
about groups next.
Never mind then.
Not a
Yeah.
problem. Does anyone else have a question on this section before we move to groups? Excellent. Okay, so groups is one of the other sections on here. And they also have schools and companies, et cetera, so and jobs. So obviously LinkedIn has a lot of different features with regards to this. So now groups are essentially people in either different industries, different interests, et cetera, all in one area. And you can ask to join certain groups. You can also advertise on certain groups. So for example, the first one that popped up for me is an accounting group. Now, if I'm not an accountant, I probably wouldn't join this group, but if accountants are, let's say, your #1 digital prospect that you want to connect with, it would not be bad to connect with a group. Now, some groups have rules, just like in Facebook, where, you know, some groups say if you are an accountant, you can't join, but you can find a lot of different groups like this that you may be able to join. So like you might be able to join a business owners group, and there might be accountants in that business owners group. I'm in groups that are both in my industry, so like digital marketing, as well as groups that are just interest groups. So like I'm in the MIT alumni group, I'm in the MIT fencing group, I'm in a larger fencing group. So you can kind of decide which groups you'd like to be a part of. And think of it like having a BNI membership, except on the internet, right? Where this is a way for you to have a group of people that you can start to build relationships with and perhaps like network with. And some of these groups might be certain locations. So it might be the Washington, DC social media group, right? Or some of them might be nationwide. The benefits of a nationwide group are there are usually a lot more members. The benefits of a local group is those are actual people that you could meet with essentially at some point and have a business relationship with. And then Michael, why don't you kick it off? What was your question about groups?
No, you answered it because, you know, as you've been talking, I've got another monitor up where I'm just kind of following along on my own LinkedIn, doing the same things you're doing. And as I type in different positions, I kept seeing groups and I was just confused on exactly what they were. Yeah,
and within a group, you can actually post within a group. And depending on the group's, you know, security profile, it's sometimes public, but sometimes not. So let's see if I find the fencing group that I'm in. So then there's also organizations have pages as well too. I'll go back to my page to my groups. But then in the group, you can actually post. And a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll post in the group, maybe an advertisement or a question or answer somebody's question. And then it allows you to engage with other people in that group as well too.
So when you post into one of these groups, Heather, is that something where you would just, you know, similarly to how you would post on your normal feed, except you might not be connected with everybody in this group? Because let's say, like I'm looking at one now, I just typed in lacrosse, and US Lacrosse has 11,000 members.
Right.
So I'm obviously not going to be connected with 11,000 people, but I could post something and then reach an audience larger of whatever my normal network is. And if somebody's interested, you know, ideally they would then ping me back.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly how it works. And it's very similar to kind of groups on Facebook as well too, if you're familiar with that, where it is meant to be kind of a board where you can share things, discuss things, advertise things as well.
So Heather, with the group thing, like let's say I have a Fortune magazine article that I thought that would be something that would be interesting to the CPA group or the nonprofit group, how do I take that article and put that on the group? Because normally they'll have like the hyperlink. You click LinkedIn and then it'll go to your personal one, and then you type in your stuff and then you hit send or post.
Mhm.
How do you do that for groups?
Very, very similar. So within groups, that's the exact same thing that you do. You can post a link and then people can comment it. And I apologize, I'm trying to pull it up here so I can show you an example. There we go. So like BNI has a group too, for example. There's a very large BNI group. And then as you can see, because I'm a member of this group, I can start a conversation.
Which chapter is that, Heather?
This is actually the international BNI
Oh,
page.
you're on global? Okay.
Yeah, so this is probably quite a few people. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hits from this question. Right.
It's a little blurry. Can you read it to us, please?
Yeah, so what I'm posting is, how have you adjusted your marketing efforts as a result of COVID? What industry are you in and what is working for you? And you can actually put a picture on that post. You can put a video on that post. You can put a link to an article. You can add a poll, offer others help, etc. So if I post this on the page, what will happen is it'll post to this page, and then people who are on LinkedIn that are in this group will see this come up in their feed on LinkedIn. This has just about 84,000 members on it. Now, what I've posted is just, as you can see, an innocuous question, right? So what's working for your marketing right now? But it starts a conversation with people, one, that might give me some good information for myself and for my business, right? But then two, it also puts my profile in front of a lot of people that maybe are thinking about what's going on with their marketing, right? And maybe it'll start a conversation with some people to get that process rolling. And now the same is true for what's on this page, right? Which is someone might post a link that says Big Pharma has some serious competition. And I might comment on that link and say, great article. And then when I comment on that article, other people will see my post on that. Now, what I found is very, very successful on LinkedIn, getting you a lot of people to look at your profile, is actually commenting on what other people have posted on LinkedIn. Now, whether that's people who are your connections, or if it's people that that like could potentially work with you, either way, it gets you a lot of visibility on LinkedIn. And actually, if you follow some key people on LinkedIn, such as you can follow Bill Gates, you can follow tech leaders, you can follow inspirational speakers, you can follow a lot of people who might have a good following. And I especially find that when I engage with them in a meaningful way, right? When you're contributing something to that conversation that has some meaning and also has some value to other people, that other people start engaging with you on LinkedIn as well too. So beyond kind of the DC bubble of what can we be doing, there's also obviously like national people that we can follow that also get you people to engage with you on LinkedIn as well too. And you never know. I mean, I know, David, you're kind of the master of a lot of these connections that end up being a connection of a connection and working out to something. That's exactly what the idea is behind doing these processes, is making those connections that could eventually lead to new business or big business for somebody.
And you have to be a member of the group too in order to make a post, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and depending on the
Heather,
group, it might take longer or shorter to hear back as they admit you as a member.
And Heather, I'm looking at some of the groups that I've already apparently joined. And will I only see the feed if I actually navigate to this group? It won't automatically drop it in my homepage news feed?
So you should see it in both. You should see it both in your homepage feed and on the group. But the homepage, just like with Facebook, can get very cluttered. And when it gets cluttered, it then becomes harder for you to see posts from different places. So then it's trying to use an algorithm to show you what you want to see and what you've interacted with before. So if you're looking specifically for one group, I would recommend visiting those groups so that you can see your posts on those pages or what people have posted recently.
Thank you.
So again, I think, the areas of LinkedIn to spend your time on: the network and growing your network, and obviously prospecting. Groups, spending some time in groups that make sense for your business, for growing your business. And then also on this homepage feed. So just like with Facebook, LinkedIn has an area where you can share an article and you can share it to your network. And then you can also engage with other articles that you're seeing that your network has shared as well too. And so once you've updated your profile, you've updated your network, then it makes sense for you to start sharing content on LinkedIn. Now, where you find that content is up to you. So I think with Atlantic Union Bank, you all do have a good team right now that's managing your social media profiles. And that team puts out content both on LinkedIn and your website. And what you can do is, and always good from a compliance standpoint, is that if the company is providing that material for you to use, you should feel free that you can use and share that on LinkedIn. So, let's say a big news announcement came out about the bank. You could, for example, pull one of those articles and post it to LinkedIn. So let's say the preventing common business fraud might be something that I've been hearing a lot from my customers recently. And so I want to put that out on my LinkedIn that, you'll never hear me for your password. You'll never hear from me, to so on and so forth. And so maybe that's something that you'd like to put out on LinkedIn that people know, what are some of the fraud things that are happening right now, and what to not do if they think that they've received something that's fraud that seems to be coming from you, for example. And so then you can create a post, you can make a comment. I'm just saying, really interesting article. And then if I put post, I can add some hashtags, and as you can see, it actually looks at the article and says, okay, I know that you should put a fraud prevention hashtag on this, insurance prevention, fraud prevention. So it actually kind of helps you with some of your hashtags as well too. And then it'll post to your main feed here where other people in your network can actually see the article that you've shared. And then they can also comment on it. And as you can see for this particular person, they've gotten 32 reactions and 36 comments on the article that they shared. And if you look at some of the comments that are on the articles that you see on LinkedIn, you can see that there's a lot of people who are having interactions on these articles. So they're having conversations about them, they're interacting with each other, they're tagging other people on LinkedIn to bring their attention to this article. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can kind of engage with people. And another example might be that you don't even post the article, but you could tag someone that you know that might be interested in that article too.
Heather, I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes I see notes that'll say X number of people are looking at your post. Mention someone's name. I don't know what they mean by that.
Yep. So what they mean is, so if I wrote an article on this post, I could go, very interesting. And then I use the @ sign and it'll pull up a list, and I can find David Hobbs, tag David Hobbs, and it makes your name bold so that I know that I've tagged you. And when I post, it'll send you a notification on your LinkedIn that Heather has tagged you in a comment. And then you can actually go directly to that article to see not only what my comment was, but what is the article that I brought your attention to.
But wouldn't I see it anyway?
Not always. So let's say, for example, you're not connected to Mark McClatchy, right? You wouldn't necessarily see that article. So I'm seeing the article, but I want to get your attention on it. And then, so that's a way that we can do that.
Okay.
I think the one thing about LinkedIn that is different than Facebook is that the privacy settings are different. So Facebook started out as being a fully public network. I was on Facebook back when it was a fully public network. And let me tell you that it seems like fully public networks are not a big deal, but I did actually have a friend early on in Facebook's day get stalked by somebody because you can see everyone's information, like where they were living at the time, et cetera. And so Facebook slowly, obviously, started implementing privacy settings so that your address or where you live was not public anymore on Facebook, and you could say who can see it. Now you can choose to be fully public, but you can choose what's not fully public. LinkedIn, the main settings on LinkedIn are fully public. But I think the idea behind LinkedIn is it doesn't have that personal information about you, only the professional information about you. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's fully public. You can decide under your security settings what you would like to be for people to be able to see. But I usually recommend to people that you be as open as you feel comfortable on LinkedIn, just because that allows you, again, to make better connections to other business professionals because they can see more about you and you professionally.
Thank you.
Yes, not a problem.
Heather, I have a question. What you're sharing with us is wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's say you join a group, you're posting some information, you're commenting on others, and there's some people that you're starting to connect with, right? You're seeing them, comment on what you've posted and so forth. And let's say that, 5 of those people are one, boy, I'd really love to talk to them, about financial services. How do you take that next step to go from that sort of higher level engagement to now taking it to more of a one-on-one?
Yeah, so it depends on what your connection is with that particular person at that time.
Yeah,
so,
let's say in this case, they're a total stranger, but you've met them through
stranger.
this group and through the commentary.
So what I would do is that depending on the level of access that you have to them. So if you are connected on LinkedIn, you can send them messages on LinkedIn. You can also, comment on a post maybe that they're commenting on, like, hey, I would like to talk more about this with you on a call. Do you have some time? To try to connect via email. So if you have also some connections in common, let's say someone's they're sort of active on LinkedIn, but not super. What I mean by that is, like, you see they're on LinkedIn, but you send them a message and you don't hear back, right? A great way to connect might be to have a common connection connect you via email. And so you can actually get that introduction over email so that you can then have that in-person conversation or phone conversation. The other way too is that you can pay for different levels of access on LinkedIn. So there's premium accounts, and then there's like the Uber premium account. Premium accounts give you a little bit more access to people being able to see their contact information. The really, really premium accounts are meant for headhunters, where headhunters want to have full access to basically talent pools, and they pay for that level of access. So you can also kind of play around with the different levels of LinkedIn access to see what works best for your digital prospecting activities. So for example, if you don't want to hunt someone down for their email address, it might be better to have like a premium account rather than having to message them to get their email address and get connected in that way.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Which premium services do you use, and how have they been beneficial?
So right now, I don't use any of LinkedIn's like premium services. So I've found it's actually easy enough for me to connect to people via third party. So asking someone to make that connection. I also found that it's somewhat easier in that way because you're getting almost like what's a warm introduction to that person. So, that person's introducing you to the other person over email. So it gets their attention a little bit easier than being able to email them directly. Now, I have used not LinkedIn's network, but a third-party system to access the data that's on LinkedIn to email people. And I will say it is hard, right? Because it is a cold connection. So without that warm introduction, they do also tend to somewhat ignore your emails to them as well, too. But I have been able to connect with some people in a cold fashion that way as well, too.
Because I see one of the options is like, let's say I make a post and it'll say 5 executive directors looked at your post and I don't know who they are.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have the higher level of access, you can see which ones are accessing your content and posts. And then I also have a question from Tanya. She's asking if you want to disconnect with someone on LinkedIn, are they going to receive a notification? No. So no one will, just like with Facebook, if you unfriend somebody or if you disconnect from them, they won't receive a notification that you disconnected from them.
Heather, one thing that I think is worth calling out, and if you mentioned this and I'm just reiterating it, I apologize to everybody else on the call, but like as I'm continuing to browse around with different groups, you know, for the sake of an example, like David shared, I did DC Nonprofit Connections as a group. And one thing that I think is really neat is there's 1,706 members. And as you scroll down, I can see how many of them attended Muhlenberg College, which was my alma mater. And then I can also see of the 1,700 members in this DC nonprofit group, only 6 are in the banking industry. And I think that that's something that a lot of us stumble into oftentimes, is that we'll join some group, but the group is predominantly bankers anyway. And so if you're just one of every other bank on the corner who's a part of that group or affiliated with it, then sometimes you might be spinning your wheels or, you know, engaging in something that's not going to give you much return on your investment because the competition is so stringent. But for 1,700 people, and, you know, the description about the group is that, you know, these are all about people who have, you know, some sort of affiliation or just affirmation for nonprofits in general, and only 6 people out of 1,700 are in banking roles permanently, I think is pretty neat. So something else for people to look at as they're trying to decipher which groups to join is taking a look at some of those member highlights. And also it shows you where they're located. So of the 1,700, I can see almost 1,100 of them are located in Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Would that also pretty cool to know?
Yeah, and that's a great, I mean, thank you for pointing that out. But yeah, when you're in a lot of these different areas of LinkedIn, it'll show you people, the stats of people that are in that group. Again, it's trying to give you the tools to be able to make meaningful connections with people. So, you know, whether you're alumni, what are other associations that you have with people, it's trying to help you, it's literally trying to help you network. So LinkedIn's really helpful with regards to being able to make those meaningful connections with people. And yeah, so when you're looking for groups, it's not only groups of people who are in certain professions, but it's also groups of people with certain interests. And so let's say you know that a lot of the nonprofit leaders in our area might also be in another group, then you can join that group because you know that there are going to be other executive directors in the group that you're trying to join too. So you have to think of, I think when you're going through the digital prospecting, you have to think of what is the profile of the person, and not necessarily just the obvious qualities, right? The titles and that sort of thing, but beyond that, like what would they be interacting and what would they be doing? And I will say that of people who have gotten as far as joining groups on LinkedIn, they probably are a little bit more active on LinkedIn. So those are also people who are more likely to respond to your messages and to connect with you because they probably know how to use LinkedIn. There will always be people who are on LinkedIn but not very active. And those are harder because you don't know if they're not responding because they're not interested, or if they're not responding because they're just not that active.
Heather, how often, somebody mentioned, you know, I think it was Tanya, removing a connection, and it's nice to know that they're not alerted if that takes place. But do you ever, you know, suggest that happens? Like I noticed when you first pulled yours up, you had what looked like almost like 1,000 or a little over 1,000 connections. Do you ever think it's advantageous to go and remove a connection, or is it really just because perhaps they're, you know, too busy on a feed and you just don't want to see what, you know, they're posting anymore? Because like as I look through, right, and we're searching people based on their titles, and sometimes you can see the second, which would suggest that I know a connection that's also connected with that person, and therefore I could ask them for an introduction. But then sometimes I recognize that connection is not somebody I truly know, and I don't even remember when I necessarily accepted their invite. Right. You know, is it wise to go back through and comb through connections and get rid of ones that you don't really have any strong relationship with, or do you think it's not advantageous to do that?
So my philosophy, and thank you for asking this question, because Diane actually has a very similar question where she's asking about competitors, right? And what can competitors see about your profile, right? My philosophy on this is that I connect with anyone who would like to connect with me. And the reason I have that philosophy is I do believe that the larger your network is, the more likely you are to find value in that network. The smaller your network is, you might not find as much value, and in the sense that, like, you might have a really great connection with David Hobbs, for example, on LinkedIn. However, if David's not very active on LinkedIn, he may not be a good LinkedIn person to be connected with, right? Now that doesn't mean I want to remove David. It just means that, you know, my network being that maybe I only met Michael Brown once, but he's actually very active on LinkedIn, and sends me messages, hey, Heather, I saw this person. I thought that might be a good connection for you too. That makes Michael a little bit more of a better connection maybe than David on the LinkedIn network because, maybe Michael's more active on LinkedIn. Now, in terms of competitors, so, I'm in a fairly competitive space as well too, not necessarily in the DC area, but more like nationwide. I don't necessarily worry about competitors being able to see who I'm connected to or who my network is, et cetera, in the sense that I don't know that a lot of people really would drill down into that. The odds that someone would go to my profile to look at my connections to then say, ooh, Heather might be doing like the marketing for, so-and-so person. Let me see if I can like reach out to them. I don't know that that necessarily has value, but that's my particular industry. I wouldn't necessarily be worried about people trying to shark either my clients or my customers just from my LinkedIn profile. Because I have a lot of connections, right? So I have connections to people who are not customers and not clients. Out of those 1,400, only a small subsection would be my clients.
I think you can also block connection, or you can restrict your connections from your connections being able to view your connections, correct? Kind of like how you hide your friends on Facebook.
Yeah, so there are security settings on LinkedIn that you can play around with. I don't know necessarily though that you can decide if you would want to hide certain things, connections being one of them on LinkedIn. And especially if you're hiding it from someone that you're not connected to, that's definitely possible. But you may want to have, again, I'm more of the like open network sort of person. Like I also kind of believe that these networks have some superficial levels of security that are not necessarily that secure. So I just have a personal policy of like, it's public. If I'm putting it on here, it's public. So I don't really necessarily restrict my security settings in a pretty significant way. But what I would say is that also allows you to connect with other people and other people to see your connections too. So it does make it, in my opinion, it makes it a little bit more of an interactive network when you can see the network, as opposed to when you kind of start to restrict access. But again, everyone has a different level of comfort with these security systems. And I would say you do what you believe, is what you want to share out there. Other things that you can share on these pages, again, you can share content, you can share videos, you can write comments on this particular home screen, depending on what's there. And these are ways that I've found are the easiest ways to kind of engage with people in a meaningful way and be able to get more people to see your profile and get to see you. Groups are another one. And then searching out your network is the third kind of powerful thing about the how to use LinkedIn. And like I said, I mean, I would, as an individual, make sure that you have put on your calendar, I'm going to spend on Mondays from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. on LinkedIn, making some of these connections so that I can make these connections for the rest of the week. And then I'll start over again on Monday. I think, if you really want to, just like you might dedicate yourself to doing like cold calling, for example, this would be an example of how you could dedicate yourself to doing digital prospecting every week, and getting more familiar with it. And I want to encourage those of you that don't feel that comfortable with LinkedIn right now, to just spend some time on it, because it constantly is changing. I cracked a joke with David and Michael when we were talking about this. I said, every time I jump on LinkedIn, they've changed where they put things, which makes me feel like, oh, sorry guys, it's not in that area anymore. Let me go to the other area that it's in. So don't feel like you're not knowing the system very well is uniquely you. It's definitely, even for someone like myself, LinkedIn changes fairly quickly. So, you just have to have time on the system to feel more comfortable with it. If you have questions, even after this training as well too, I mean, feel free to reach out to me. I am fully open to sending you screenshots and everything like that, especially since my screen was blurry through some of this talk as well too. And hopefully the video will turn out actually clear. So if there are sections that were blurry on the webinar, you can actually see them clearly on the video as well. But does anyone else have any questions about the features of LinkedIn or anything that we've gone over?
Heather, one of the things I noticed is if you want, like if it says, 80 something people viewed my profile, right? And I click on that number and it says turn off privacy thing. Does that let me see all 83 or not necessarily? I still have to get that premium service to do that.
It'll let you see most of them. What it won't let you see is there are people that have higher levels of security on there. So some people have, if I allow people to see me when I'm viewing their profile, then they can see that I'm viewing their profile. So it's like kind of a joint, it's a joint privacy thing where it's like we're both seeing, we can both see each other. And then other ones are no one can see when I look. And usually those are people who are paying for the higher level accounts. I can see I can see them, but they can't see me, sort of deal. Then those ones you do have to have a higher level of access on LinkedIn to be able to see if they're looking at your information.
How do we change that on our profile?
Yes. So if you go under settings and privacy, you'll see the different settings and privacy for LinkedIn. And it's just under your picture at the top on LinkedIn, you'll see that. And it goes through everything. So it goes through account preferences, sign-in security, visibility, communications, data privacy, and then advertising data. And I recommend that people go through these settings every so often because they do change, and they do change the types of settings that you can have, et cetera. Visibility would be that area. So visibility shows you your options with regards to how people can see you and what you're doing on LinkedIn. So you can choose whether or not you're visible or viewing in private mode. You can do story viewing options, so whether or not people can see if you're looking at certain stories. You can edit your public profile, who can see or download your email address, who can see your connections, who can see your last name, your organizations, your visibility off of LinkedIn, who could discover your profile from your email address, in other words, searching for you. So all of these are the different settings that you can kind of manage on LinkedIn. And in fact, it's reminding me that I need to go through these as well too. It also allows you to see a lot of the data that you have on LinkedIn as well too, and advertising. Because if you didn't know, people do advertise on LinkedIn. I particularly find it a little bit difficult to deal with from a messaging standpoint. I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn that are advertisements now. So you can kind of change this as well too if you feel like you're getting spammed a little bit too much on LinkedIn. Any other questions about LinkedIn? Or tips and tricks? What I'll do right now is I'll share my email address and contact information in the chat. And then I'll also send out a note after this when I've been able to upload the video so that people can also access the video afterwards as well too. So either way, you can reach me via email. You can watch the video afterwards so that way that this can become a resource for you. But like I said, I think my biggest piece of advice is to just work this into your habit. I think the hardest thing, oops, that was private. Let me share that publicly. I think the hardest thing to do when you're starting some new initiatives from a prospecting point of view is just to get that as a part of your work habit, as something that you're spending time and dedicating time to. And I think that especially if you put a time limit on how much time that you're going to spend on it, one, doesn't feel so overwhelming, and two, it makes sure that you're dedicating that particular time frame or that particular time to working on that.
The one thing that I would like to add too is, one of the things that I always like to do is pay it forward. And, some of this information for some of our clients or prospects that we want to get in front of, they can probably use this kind of information, and you could probably share some of what you just learned or what you already know with your customers to help them to grow. Because, they go from $1 million in their account to 3 million, then, everybody wins.
Exactly.
So, and if they want something that's a little bit more advanced than what we can talk about, then you can just kick them to Heather, because like I said, it's all about us helping each other to get ahead. And if you could help your customer to get ahead, or prospect that you really want to get close with, you could help them, and then you'll be looked at in a different light than other bankers trying to get their business.
Exactly. Yeah, and from a referral or from a company standpoint, we always do free audits for companies And even for individuals, I love connecting with other business professionals, talking to them about what we do and how we do it. And my biggest belief as a salesperson, that's one of my roles at the company, right, is that you sell by educating people, right? And so I educate people about what is it that we do, what is it that digital marketing looks like, how does it work, and how do you implement it? And I'm not necessarily afraid to share my trade secrets, because I think, again, reiterating my point from before, the hardest thing to do as a business is to actually be able to be consistent and to be monotonously consistent. My company is monotonously consistent. Like we produce just over 300 pieces of content a month. That's a lot of writing, right? We post those to people's websites. We are active on them for social media every week, every day. And we do that for people so that they have a consistent presence online, so that they're engaging with their community online. And so I'm not afraid to share my secrets, because I think it is very difficult for a lot of people to be that monotonous, right? To have a structure where they do that consistently. And marketing is all about being consistent and being in front of people, so that when they're ready to make that business decision to switch banks, or they're ready to make that business decision that they need to get a loan, that they see your message, because now they're ready and they're going to reach out. So yeah, I welcome any connections that you want to make. If anyone wants to also connect with me one-on-one too, to learn more about each other, that's great too. I welcome any of those connections as well.
So Heather, what are some of the needs and the problems that customers typically come up to you and ask you to do or solve?
That's a great question. So usually customers that we've talked to, there's two things that they identify as being issues with their business. One is that they might have a steady number of people that come to them through people who are connections, right? So customer refer to customer that refer to customer, friends and family refer to more friends and family, but that they're really looking for significant growth as a business. So whether it's, like this one client that we had that was consistent for 10 years, she was happy with that. She had 3 young kids. She wasn't really able to invest in the business at that point. But when she was ready, she wanted to turn it on. She wanted to grow the business and fast, right? And so that was one. The other one is that sometimes we meet businesses where there's multiple owners involved. Maybe it's like a law firm, for example, where the younger folks in the law firm are like, guys, we got to be on social media. We got to be posting. We got to have something on the web. And oftentimes the owners that are transitioning out of the business have built a business off of word of mouth, and so don't necessarily understand, what should we be doing on the internet, much less should we be on the internet. And beyond a website, what does a digital strategy look like? So those are usually the two types of businesses that we work with. They're looking to grow big, or they're also looking to like transition leadership, add new people to the business, et cetera. And then especially in times of COVID too, I will tell you that the strategy's changed, right? So there's a lot more people that are engaging online. If you know any businesses that have really old websites, we've redone a couple of websites recently. And while we've always seen a nice uptick in someone's online presence after they've redone their website, it's incredible. I mean, we're talking literally, we put the website online and all of a sudden overnight, they get 10 times as many requests to the website than they did just a month ago when they had the old website up. So there's a lot more people on the internet today. There are a lot more people looking to engage on the internet. And so if maybe your website's old, you're not getting a lot of people contacting you through your website. But then also if you're not doing the right things, like maybe you're not doing webinars, you're not advertising webinars, you're not advertising on Google, you're not advertising on social media, you're missing out, because everybody's on social media now, everybody's on Google or Zoom. So those are some of the things that like maybe people are struggling with right now. They're like, look, I need more customers, but I don't know how to reach them. So those are other people that could use help right now too.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Heather, this is Paul. Long time no see.
Hello. Hi, Paul.
But one question I've actually always had with LinkedIn is there a way to put in like an embedded click on here link to like bring you to our website, as opposed to, because on Facebook you can actually put a word like set an appointment and then it kicks over. How do you do that on LinkedIn?
So, and you're talking about a link to like a specific website page, for
As
example?
opposed to having like the URL,
Mhm.
like set an appointment, see Paul Riley, and then the link's embedded in that text.
So it allows you to put links on LinkedIn. So if your link is to, for example, your Calendly, for example, so that someone can, directly book you on Calendly, you can put that on there, and then you can change the photo so that it's not like the logo of that particular website, for example. There right now they don't have a way that you can customize a button, just that you can customize the link. Now, the one thing I will say that maybe is a little deceptive about the links on LinkedIn is that some of them do appear to be LinkedIn links. So like this, for example, has a different call to action button because it's a ad. So ads can have customized buttons. But let's see if I can find a regular link. Okay. So for example, this person is promoting his Spotify and his Apple podcasts on LinkedIn. They are shortened links. They look like Bitly's, but it has LinkedIn in it. Now this will go to, this is my, Sebastian and I were in fencing together at MIT. That's awesome. So it'll go to that Spotify account, even though it looks like it's a LinkedIn. The reason it shortens the link like that is it's one, tracking who's clicking that link. And then two, it's just, it's making sure that LinkedIn has internal data. So for example, Sebastian will then know that I'm one of the people that clicked on his Spotify link to then go see his Spotify account. Does that make sense, Paul? So like, for example, if I pull this open Spotify link into LinkedIn, when I try to put it into LinkedIn in the homepage here, it'll look like that link until I post it, and then it'll change the link. But yeah, you can put any link you would like into LinkedIn.
That does. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask? Excellent, excellent. Well, we are a little bit early with our meeting. If anyone has any further questions or would like to connect with me one-on-one, please feel free to reach out to me. I just put my email and phone number in the chat box, as well as I will send out the video for this call after our call as well too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for taking the time out to do this. I know this is a really busy season for you. So really appreciate it. And I know a lot of folks, probably in the back of their mind, they have questions, but they don't want the whole world to know their questions. So you can just reach out to Heather directly. Great resource. It's always nice to have, you don't necessarily need to go to her with, referral or anything like that. If you just want to bounce an idea, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this to build up, to get ready for 2021. What's your thought? And she's always been really kind with her time to just kind of share ideas, just to bounce them off.
Absolutely. I like to share my knowledge, be a resource, and also connect with other business professionals too.
All right. Thanks.
Great. Well, I hope everybody has a great Friday. And I know you all have another training seminar, so I hope you get a little bit of a break before your next training seminar for those of you who have to jump on the next one.
All right.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Bye.